Let's walk with the lens of a child through the school, and actually what messages for safeguarding are you picking as a 7-year-old child? Or if you were the parent, let's look on the outside of the school. Tell me what you're getting. What's the message this school is sending you as a parent about safeguarding?
Good afternoon, Jamie, and thank you for joining us today on our podcast. Would you like to tell everybody about yourself?
Hi, yes, I'm Jamie Ainscow. I am currently a head teacher and an executive head in Milton Keynes over 2 schools. So head teacher at Heronshaw School on the south side of the city, and have recently taken up the appointment of executive head at a school called Ashbrook. So yeah, exciting times.
It's a bit bigger than that, though. You also have a big trust role, don't you, within safeguarding?
Yeah, that's right. So both of these schools, both Heronshaw and Ashbrook, are part of trust within Milton Keynes and Oney and Corby. It's called Inspiring Futures Through Learning, and at present there are 15 schools. And so for the last couple of years, I've had a role being part of the safeguarding team, which has been a growing team. And I'm a special advisor for safeguarding across the 15 schools, which has presented, some very interesting moments. And we'll talk a bit about the strategy that we've been developing as well for the trust over the last few years and what that's looked like. As one of my schools has been through OFSTED as well within the last couple of years. So yeah, it's been full on.
Interesting. I bet it has. So what is your role then as this deputy DSO on the trust? What is that? What do you do?
So initially there was myself and the lead for safeguarding within the trust. We've since expanded that team. So there's 3 people within the core element of the safeguarding team, and there's additional specialist advisors because we've broken the trust up into 3 regions: Corby schools, then the North Milton Keynes schools, and the South Milton Keynes. So what we do together, we think about the current picture of safeguarding, current legislation, but also about the demographics between our schools, which is very, very different, of course. And we're thinking about how we can benchmark one school against another, but also how we can have that security of the judgments of the quality of safeguarding and our provisions for families within our trust schools. So a lot of work has gone into creating a cohesive approach to safeguarding, and actually about what tools and mechanisms we can put in place to support each of those DSLs and wider safeguarding teams in the individual schools, but also how as a trust we can identify where schools maybe need some support as well. So it's been a 2-pronged approach.
Wow. And you mentioned earlier that you have a safeguarding strategy in place. What's that?
So safeguarding strategy was really pulling together all the information that we had to have as a school and as a trust from a compliance point of view, what we were feeding back to the local authority, but also it was to break down what assurance plans we could have in place that would support each individual school. For example, looking at single central record, we had a benchmark on a setting out saying, okay, this school needs to have a single central record looked at frequently, but who's going to do that within the school, within the trust, within the trustees and governance, and setting out almost a timetable for the whole year as to all the activities that would be carried out, but who would be responsible from a school level, from the trust level, and from a governance point of view. And then by setting out that programme of assurance, then meant that we could then carry out some deep dives into specific areas within safeguarding to look in more detail at either from a quality assurance point of view, looking at the quality of record keeping, and then have a system where the school could find out if they need extra support, or if we can then pair it with another school that's potentially got better practice, so they can learn from each other. And it ultimately leads into CPD for the wider teams within school. So we're lifting everybody to a really good place together.
That sounds really good. And have all the schools taken it on positively? So working
absolutely.
together.
I think, yeah, definitely. That safeguarding is one of those areas where people are very happy for people to wrap around them and to be that supportive network. other areas within a school might want more autonomy and more creativity, but actually when it's safeguarding, the importance of safeguarding and child protection, people are really happy to have the expertise to go in. And being within that team, it's a journey. You're constantly learning from what you see. You pick up something in one school and then you take it and you're magpieing an idea that you pass on to somebody else. And I suppose the strategy has developed and continues to develop, and it's always going to be a work in progress. What we think might be a finished product, but actually then you see something somewhere else and take it on board.
Yeah, that's amazing. And you talked about like you did deep dives. What would that look like, about a deep dive into safeguarding?
So we've done deep dive, for example, can be into pupil files, and I suppose it's similar to an OFSTED would take a random selection of pupils, look into their chronologies on whichever recording system is being used, and that deep dive would look at right back from the start. So starting back from that very first entry for the child, we'd look and see the quality of the record keeping. Who is it that's making the record keeping? Because if it's always the DSL and nobody else, then is it confined to the knowledge by one person, or is there evidence that it's a shared record from teaching assistants to cleaners to the senior leaders within the school, and actually everybody's invested, because that gives an indication as to culture within the school. We would then follow it through and look at information that's been held, external services, external professionals who've been part of the decision making and follow up, and then looking at actions and how timely the schools are responding to specific actions that need to either be carried out in the future or that have been carried out. So it gives a timeline, a really clear timeline as what the need was, what's happened, and what's coming next for that pupil. And so we carry out numerous deep dives into the pupil files, and from that, we've created a RAG rating system. So there's a statement that kind of, okay, this school is green and it meets all the elements of this green statement, or maybe it's amber because there's some inconsistencies to that, or red if something's not in place. So it's a structure on which we are benchmarking all schools against a level playing field, really. And that really informs schools ahead of an inspection, but also when they want to carry out an audit for themselves, because it's very much an assurance model rather than the schools ensuring things are in place for themselves.
And I bet it builds confidence as well within the schools to know that they're doing everything they can, I suppose, to safeguard.
Yeah, absolutely.
Everyone.
And it really supports the schools. They've got a DSL, they've got a deputy DSL, and there's a wider team with the designated safeguarding officers as well. And of course, when we're thinking about upskilling, because within the trust, it's very much about the development of staff within the trust and bringing in new staff to upskill and take on the journey. It means that even if they're inexperienced in safeguarding, they know exactly what the expectations are, because they've got something down there in black and white, and see how you can move a school from red to amber and into green. Ultimately, that is best practice for pupils that are attending all the schools within the trust.
Yeah, that sounds really good, really good.
Yeah.
So, when you're working with these other schools and other people, what do they say to you? What are the positives and the benefits that they say to you as working in this way?
I think it mainly comes from taking it. There's always something to take away from the meeting. There's always something that a piece of advice that means that they can work smarter, not harder, down to how to simplify record keeping. I've been into schools where just from past experience, whatever that experience might have been, that record keeping can become longer, more complicated. They want to get so much down in detail that actually it slows down a process and means that the crucial information is hidden somewhere within the record. So we've come back to creating simple methods for bullet pointing, or having a statement of what the overarching theme of that update is, and then having the detail, and then having a separate space for the actions. Just simple, very quick things that can be taken on board. But yeah, staff find that really useful. Also, then from doing a walk around the school, it might be an environment walk, and we're looking at what's displayed, posters within different areas of the school, but also then looking through a different lens. So we would walk to school and say, yeah, but imagine you're the child. Let's walk with the lens of a child through the school, and actually what messages for safeguarding are you picking as a 7-year-old child? Or if you were the parent, let's look on the outside of the school. Tell me what you're getting. What's the message this school is sending you as a parent about safeguarding? So it's helpful to provide the tools and the lenses for those people to see their own school in a different light.
I think that's really good what you said about looking through a different lens of the child or the parent. I don't know if all schools do that. I think they, like you said, sometimes they try and overcomplicate processes because they feel like they have to put everything down just in case, when actually they don't. I think people will take that away to look at it through the lens of a child rather than just the head or the teacher or the DSL.
Yeah,
I think
definitely.
that's really crucial. You talked a little bit about past OFSTED experiences and lessons learnt from that. So what lessons have you learned along the way with OFSTED?
Yeah, so I, as head teacher of one of my schools, we'd had 2 OFSTED inspections within 14 months of each other, because one was Section 8 ungraded inspection and then the full Section 5. So leading that school through 2 inspections was really eye-opening to see the perspective of different inspectors and how they would look into safeguarding. I was also then within a trust role, was involved in a further 4 OFSTED inspections last year within our trust schools, and supporting the DSLs and wider safeguarding teams. And I think the main things that came out were really how robust the systems are that you've got, and the information isn't just held by 1 or 2 or 3 people. I think where the most success came across is really embedding the culture of safeguarding within the school, and that's reflected by how the pupils will talk about safeguarding, but how your support staff, your leadership team in the school, how the cleaners that are supporting either at the beginning or the end of the day, how they all have that invested approach, that they all recognise that each of them carry a little piece of a puzzle. So a jigsaw piece that they may have seen something, heard something at any time during the school day or around the school day that is feeding into the bigger picture for that pupil, for that family, for that cohort of children. And that's really, really been invaluable, I think, for those schools. The record keeping, having a really tight chronology on what's happening, and signposting to all those external professionals is really, really key, so that no one's skipping through the radar. And yeah, the strategy that I talked about that we had within all of those schools, it came down to that strategy fed into weekly meetings where you've got a mechanism for ensuring that every child has either had an action carried out or something's on the radar. And I know the OFSTED inspectors challenge how quickly are you getting back to an action that's been set? Are we talking 7 days? Are we talking 48 hours? And the quicker those actions are put in place, it's more beneficial for the family.
And was there any like surprise questions that Ofsted asked you regarding safeguarding that you weren't quite ready for?
Do you know, with the inspections, there's always a curveball. Sometimes it's not necessarily for the lead, but they will ask a question about the culture, about the training that's carried out, but then that question is going to be asked to every member of staff that they bump into down the corridor. So you've got to be, as a safeguarding lead, really self-assured and confident that actually what you are saying you've put into practice, because they're going to triangulate every piece of evidence that you give them. So I, for example, within my schools, we have an expectation that if there is any concern, no matter how big, how small, that information will reach a DSL within 10 minutes. It's a non-negotiable that we've created. And over the months that you repeat that message, you share it within briefings, in safeguarding masterclasses, You just ask people randomly in the staff room, you know, if there's a concern, how long, until everyone is within 10 minutes. But it's that choral reminder, and everybody just knows, and it's just part and parcel of the daily activity within school. So that when an inspector is asking that member of staff, okay, what do you do? They all say it's within 10 minutes, and it's a very well rehearsed, but it's then part of the school culture that you've created. Questions about who you might report allegations against a member of staff, or the whistleblowing policy. They're things that have been really kind of tight, and I've really noticed a lot of questioning around that, and the process and procedures that are set out in keeping children safe in education. They want everybody to be really aware of those elements as well, and all the updates. So we do lots of training. We do our morning briefing on safeguarding, as well as part of staff meetings, but we ensure that everybody is captured in that CPD ongoing, so that they can all tell you about the changes. And one of the lessons learned from OFSTED is how do you guarantee that you're capturing everybody? It's all very well having a staff briefing in the morning, but you know there's on a Wednesday morning for a briefing, there's possibly someone who only works Monday, Tuesday, or they only work on a Friday. So how do you get that message to them as well? So thinking about a mechanism within your school that everybody has got that message, irrespective of how much or how little they work within the school, but they can all they can show that, and it's evidence. I have evidence for everything that I do. I keep lists, signed agreements, and a schedule of everything that's a schedule of all the training that has gone before, and a schedule of all the training that comes after. And that's really, that shows that it's not a list that's been created at the start of an academic year, but it's in response to the changing needs of families, the changing needs of children, and you're very responsive. CPD follows a need, something you've identified.
No, that's really good. And it also shows that you are taking safeguarding seriously, because you have planned it throughout the year. And you talked about, you know, it's in your meetings. And what are your masterclasses? I'm intrigued. What are your safeguarding masterclasses?
So our masterclasses, we might have, so for example, it could be on a half-termly basis, we will gather all the data. So it will be the number of phone calls that we've made to the MASH team, to the local authority. We might think about the number of low-level concerns that we've had within the school, and we benchmark that against all the other schools within the Academy Trust. So you can see, we know there's a difference between the demographics, but we can then say, okay, we've got a much higher volume of calls going through to children's social care, and that creates the questions around, well, why is that happening, or why is it not happening? Then if we unpick the data, then we might find there's a trend. Okay, it could be on domestic violence, for example, that there's been an increase in domestic violence allegations reported to us. And then from that, it would feed into creating a masterclass. So we would have a briefing for safeguarding with a focus on domestic violence, looking at the signs, the symptoms of domestic violence, and we could give some indications as to the number of families within the school setting that may be experiencing issues linked with domestic violence, and then things to look out for, so that it means that it's on the radar of all staff, midday supervisors who are out on the playground having a conversation that may have seemed quite incidental or not related to anything important, actually can be a prime piece of information that needs to be fed through. So it's raising the awareness and keeping the current trends of the school high on the priority list. And then what we do is we make it from that analysis, we look and think, domestic violence, or is it physical abuse? What are the top 5 areas of concern for the school? So that then we have a session each week, and we'll take each in turn to talk about it. Or a scenario, we could give a random scenario for staff to think about, discussing groups, and how would you respond to that, so that all the staff get training about responding to children, responding to parents, maintaining the relationship with parents as well. But we break it down. It's little and often, rather than having just your September update for the Keeping Children Safe in Education and a full day safeguarding, it's much more effective, we've found, to do little and often, 10-minute slots here and there.
I like it. And is that how you get those staff members that perhaps are part-time and not always going to be able to attend every single session? How do you get them to access this additional?
Yeah, so it's different within the different schools in our trust. Some, so in one of my schools, for example, we have that list, that signed list of who's attended. And then it's a kind of mop-up session. You might try and have a meeting with midday supervisors separately, and then you catch your cleaning staff at another time. But as soon as you've shared that message, then they sign that they've understood their responsibilities with that. There are other systems, and of course, every school will find a different system that works well for them. There are some online systems where you can then create a recording. I know some where they've a video recording of the briefing that then is emailed out to everybody. Some you can share a document and then it's digitally signed to say that everyone's read and understood it. So it's whatever works well for each individual school. You find the mechanism where ultimately you need to make sure that within the week it's signed or it's digitally signed, a checklist that everyone's had that piece of information shared with them. And it's their responsibility, as well as the DSL, as well as the head teacher, to ensure that people are accessing information that's relevant to their role.
No, that's really good. You can tell that safeguarding is a number one priority. Now, you spoke about parents a little bit when you talked about, seeing it from their point of view. So how do you work with your parents and families with safeguarding?
Well, maintaining the relationship is absolutely key. And I think that that's a journey that has not always been an easy one to follow, because if you are making a referral for a family because of an allegation that's been made or a disclosure from a child, then it's tricky. It's tricky to keep working with that family. And sometimes they can feel that they're going head to head with the school when actually we're working in the best interests of the child together. So being as transparent and sharing that information, sharing what is being shared with children's social care is absolutely key. And having the confidence to sit down with that parent and say what has been reported, but actually that we're not sitting in a position of judgment. What we're doing is we're passing information because it's a duty of care to that child, but then we will signpost and try to work with the family to get the best solution for the family. It's not about sitting in judge and jury position, but actually saying, okay, we recognize there's a challenge, we recognize there's some difficulty, and we might go down the route of children's social care or family support, or we might liaise with early help advisors that we have within the local authority, who can then further signpost families on to somebody that they need to either support just the child individually, or it might be the family as a whole as well. And we have found that families where there have been referrals, multiple referrals, that they are the ones who have the closest link to us as a school, because they recognise that we are relentless in our approach, but actually we're not giving up on the child, and we have their interests at the heart of it, which is really, it's really important. It's a challenging role for everyone involved, but ultimately we want the best for the children.
So with your head teacher hat on at the moment, I know you've got exec head and all of that. So what are your top 3 non-negotiables for safeguarding for your school, and then as an exec head, and then as a trust lead? Ooh. Are they the same? Are they different?
So I would say as a head teacher, I think it is a head teacher, exec head across the trust. You need to have a really tight, robust mechanism in place where you create a communication loop. So from the very first disclosure from a child, that you really capture everything. It's not recorded in War and Peace, but you contain it so that actually that record has got to make sense to another professional in 5 years' time. And that's what the message I always share with people. When you're writing a record, it's not for you, it's not for the next teacher who knows the family and knows the situation, but it's got to make sense in the future to somebody who's totally unrelated. So you have to have that loop where you're identifying the issue, you've got your action set out, who's checking that the action is carried out, and then it's reviewed. So you've got a really satisfactory conclusion to that situation. It's all tied up. I like the record to be really nice, tied up at the end of it, and you're then moving on. Second, what I would say is, it's the record keeping. Quality of record keeping is absolutely key. So put in a lot of CPD, a lot of training on high quality record keeping, and get that checked by multiple people within the school. Don't settle for it just one person checking it. I always sit alongside somebody when they record something for the first time, so that they learn the quality that is expected, and share the record with the team around the child. What I do on a half-termly or a termly basis, depending on the needs of the child, is I would sit with a class teacher and I would go through all the children in their class who are currently on our list for safeguarding, and they're rated as either red because maybe in crisis, or it's amber or blue. And then you wouldn't go into all the finite detail for the child, but you'd give the overarching level of need and say, okay, you're aware that there's domestic violence. Can't go into the detail, but do be aware that there's a lot of involvement. So if you're listening out and you see something, hear something, then let us know. So every teacher at the end of that term has a really rich understanding of the needs of the children within their class. So it's shared knowledge throughout the school. And the third one is, develop your culture, create your culture through drip feeding constantly. I've been to schools where if I say to staff, okay, tell me about the training that you've had for safeguarding, if the first thing that rolls off their tongue is that they have the September training, then it's it's a red flag. It's that little alarm goes off. There's got to be much more than that. That's great if you're talking to them in September, October, but if you're talking to them in May and June, potentially some of that information's been lost. So you want that culture where they talk about, it's part and parcel. We talk about it all the time. It's in our team meetings. It's in briefings. We get notifications. We get emails about it. It's just you're creating a culture where you feel it when you walk through the school. You really get a sense the moment you walk in that it's high as a priority in there as well. Yeah,
I think culture is a good one, because people think if you try to explain what safeguarding culture is, it's very difficult for you to say what it is. It's a feeling, isn't it? It's just something when you go in and everybody's singing from the same sheet, everybody is saying what you're saying, and everybody knows and doing the same things, and it you know it when you see it, and you know it when you feel it and go in, don't you? And it's that feeling that you go
definitely
in.
So I've been outside of our trust. I've visited other schools, and they've created a culture. Sometimes they can give you a lot of information when you arrive at the school, but some schools have also then given me a questionnaire to leave before fill in about how I felt about the safeguarding at the school, if I felt I had enough information. Things like that are really useful as well, but it also it leaves you with that lasting impression that they take it seriously, and there's going to be some action or improvement following every person's visit to the school. So it's always finding what suits and what meets the needs of the school. But sometimes it can be the little things that make the big impact for a visitor.
Absolutely. Well, you've shared lots with us today, and I really do appreciate it. I think a lot of people are going to take a lot of information away. I especially like the questionnaire when you leave a school. I like that. It's like, what do you think? It's like, review our school for safeguarding. I like it. It's very good. I've never heard of that. It's brilliant. So what we're doing now at the end of these new series that we're doing on our podcast is getting the last person that we've interviewed to ask the next person a question. Now, you're the first. So I'm going to ask you the question, and then you're going to tell me what your question is for the next person. Is that all right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, here's one for I've got it written down. So I'm going to get it. So my question to you is, what does safeguarding actually mean to you? And is it just about the children?
Safeguarding to me is absolutely not just about the children. The safeguarding is thinking about getting the best for every child within the school. You've got such an extreme from the most severe child protection to making sure that everybody is having a really positive life experience, and actually that the school is at the heart of the community to provide for that child. But actually, in order to get the best, you've got to create a really good community culture where you're working alongside parents. The school and the parents want the best for their children. And so creating a system where the families feel supported by the school is absolutely crucial. Sometimes to get the best for the child, you need to be able to provide some support or signposting for that wider family. And you might find that children who are most at need have got parents who have that extra support needed as well, because it can be a never-ending loop where they've had children's social care involved from their own childhood. So signposting to professional support really is the way forward.
Oh, lovely. Thank you. And so what is your question for our next person?
Okay, so my question for the next person is thinking about their individual school. What's the biggest challenge that faces them and their school in terms of continuous professional development for their staff at their school?
Love it. That'll be interesting. Knowing that all the stuff you do for safeguarding, it'll be interesting to hear what they do. Now, that's great.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you very much for your time today. And thank you for sharing all the wonderful things you and your trust do for safeguarding. I think it's amazing. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hi, thank you so much for listening to this episode. If you could all do me a favour and just click that subscribe button, that would be great. Thanks, bye.